something went wrong. Hopefully it didn't go wrong now. Paul Hoffman is a regular participant on the Biz News platforms. He is with Accountability Now. He's a SC, is that right? Senior counsel?
That's right, senior counsel. Yeah.
And how did Accountability Now come into being, Paul?
Well, I got a bee in my bonnet about accountability in 2008 and decided with one other person to set up what is now still a small NGO that runs on the smell of an oil rag. And we have mainly concentrated on exacting accountability, promoting responsiveness through confronting corruption in South Africa. We've had quite a lot of success, and we were involved in the Glenister litigation, in the bread cartel case, and in bringing about that useless commission of inquiry into the arms deals. So blame us for that.
How do you pick your battles?
Quite carefully, because the main source of income of an organization like this is successful costs award. So when people ask me who pays the bills at Accountability Now, I can honestly and truthfully answer Jacob Zuma with your money, because we always beat him when we take him to court.
Wow. And today you did a big thing. You are creating a Chapter 9 institution. Maybe before we go into what you've done, what is a Chapter 9 institution?
All right. As most of your viewers will know, traditionally, the way that modern governments are organized is on a three-legged pot: a legislature, an executive, and a judiciary. And in South Africa, when we converted from the parliamentary sovereignty of the apartheid years to the constitutional democracy under the rule of law that is currently in place, the founders very wisely thought that it would be proper to create a fourth leg on the pot, which is the leg created by Chapter 9 of the Constitution. So Chapter 9 is a reference to the chapter under which at the moment there are 6 institutions that essentially exist to bed down democracy. You could call them the integrity branch of government with a small I, because we have appropriated the capital I Integrity Commission for the anti-corruption body that we have in mind. We think that the initials ICAC, for Independent Commission Against Corruption, don't go down too well in a country where Afrikaans is widely spoken. So we veered away from that and chose the more positive name of an integrity commission, which we would like to see become the 7th Chapter 9 institution. But while they're amending Chapter 9, they may consider folding the Gender Commission and the commission with a long name, Culture, Language, Religion, into the Human Rights Commission. That would, in these times of austerity, that would save a lot of money in terms of overheads and salaries for the commissions, which basically are looking after particular human rights rather than all human rights. That's a political decision, which I don't think we need to get into now. But assuming that they don't meddle with the other Chapter 9 institutions when the Integrity Commission is introduced as a new one, it will slot in between the functions of the Auditor General, who is there like a canary in a coal mine, looking out for irregularities in the books of the country, the government, SOEs, and municipalities, and the Office of the Public Protector, which is somewhat in disarray at the moment, but could resuscitate itself under fresh leadership. And as you know, the leader of that institution is on the carpet in Parliament facing impeachment proceedings.
So what happens to the creation, or how does something like this get created? You had a press conference this morning with some high-ranking members of the Democratic Alliance. Are they able, as an opposition party, to make this happen?
In order to establish a new Chapter 9 institution, two things need to happen. The first is that 2/3 of the members of Parliament must support the establishment of a new constitutional body, because the Constitution currently does not contemplate an integrity commission. So that constitutional amendment is required in order to establish the principle that this would be a good thing for the rule of law, for accountability, and for constitutionalism in South Africa. The second thing that needs to happen is that enabling legislation needs to be passed. There, a simple majority is enough, and the enabling legislation, like the Public Protector Act or the Auditor General Act, really sets out the rules of the game under which this new body will work on its mandate to essentially prevent, combat, investigate, and prosecute grand corruption in all its manifestations in South Africa. That involves taking some of the work away from the Hawks and some of the work, the corruption prosecutions, away from the National Prosecuting Authority. So there may be consequential amendments on those fronts. And the independence of the National Prosecuting Authority is something that could come under scrutiny at the same time, because it's neither fish nor fowl when it comes to independence. The Minister of Justice is the person who takes final responsibility for the National Prosecuting Authority on the one hand, but on the other hand, the Constitution enjoins it to act without fear, favor, or prejudice. So it's neither a normal Department of State, nor is it a Chapter 9 institution as it stands at the moment. And we think it would be important for the independence of the National Prosecuting Authority to be fortified when amendments are effected.
Paul, why do we need something like this?
Because the system is just not working at the moment.
I think we better start that one again. Yeah.
Okay. It's because, I'm sorry, my iPad is closed. I've switched off the phone and the iPad starts talking to me. What can I say?
No worries.
I will deal with it as best I can. You better give me that question again.
Why do we need an integrity commission?
Yes. Now, the reason for this is that if we go back to 2007, we had well-functioning anti-corruption machinery in the form of the Scorpions. The Scorpions were a unit within the National Prosecuting Authority that had been created by ordinary legislation by a simple majority in Parliament. And had they been a Chapter 9 institution, they would still be with us, because nobody was ever able to muster 2/3 to close them down. The ANC, against everybody in civil society, against virtually everybody in Parliament, decided that the closure of the Scorpions was an urgent requirement, and they managed to ram it through in the face of great opposition, not only in the parliamentary debates, but also in the public participation process and in the courts, where Mr. Glenister, unlike any other litigant ever in the history of South Africa, has been back to the Constitutional Court on 3 occasions in his quest for decent anti-corruption machinery of state. The first time he went, he was told he was premature and that he must allow Parliament and the Cabinet to do their work, and only if he was unhappy after that should he come back. 11-0 against him. He wasn't happy when the Hawks were introduced. He felt that the Scorpions were a better bet, and he went to court impugning the closure of the Scorpions and the appointment of the Hawks. He wasn't able to persuade the court that it was irrational to close down the Scorpions. I'd love to be able to argue that point again with the benefit of what we know now compared to what we knew then. And he was able to impugn the constitutionality of the Hawks legislation successfully. And as a consequence of that, and the majority of the court, it was a very close run thing. It was a 5-4 decision. And the consequence of that was that the court ordered the Parliament to make the reasonable decision of a reasonable decision maker in the circumstances in order to substitute the initial incarnation of the Hawks with effective and efficient anti-corruption machinery of state that is adequately independent. And that adequate independence comes from the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, to which South Africa is a party, and which binds the government when it is structuring the anti-corruption machinery of state. So instead of backing away from the idea that a mere police unit would be able to cut it on anti-corruption work, the ANC again declined to abandon the idea of the Hawks doing the job, and they tweaked the legislation relating to the Hawks as little as possible in order to attempt to satisfy the judgment. Mr. Glenister, for the third time, went back to court and said, I'm sorry, this is not the decision of a reasonable decision maker in the circumstances. And the court agreed with him and with the Helen Suzman Foundation, which was a separate applicant in a similar application that was heard at the same time. But they did not agree in the majority of the Constitutional Court that a reasonable decision maker could not, in the circumstances in which the Hawks, the police, and the cabinet found themselves at the time, locate anti-corruption machinery of the kind that is required by law within the police. That they weren't prepared to do. What they did do was do their own adjustments to the Hawks legislation. So we sit now with the third incarnation of the Hawks, and nobody in politics or in policing or in the security sector accepts that the Hawks are up to the task of investigating corruption in high places, kleptocracy, and state capture. They simply don't have the institutional and operational independence, or even the staff and the resources to do so. So the Hawks are not seen as part of the solution, and sort of upgrading them, putting lipstick on the pig, is not going to help. They are still in the police and under the wing of Bheki Cele, who you will recall was dismissed as Commissioner of Police because he was found by a board of inquiry into his fitness for office to be a person who is incompetent and dishonest. That seems to have qualified him to rejoin the cabinet, first in DAF and then in the police portfolio where he is at the moment.
What a
Quite
country.
scary.
I mean, what a country we live in. You know, what you're unpacking here, I'm sure most citizens are not at all aware of, because it's happening over there and it's happening far away. But how, if the ANC has stuck or dug its heels in so many times against anti-corruption initiatives, why would it now enable, because you're going to have to get their vote, the Integrity Commission to be established?
At last, some good news in these dark days. In August last year, the ANC National Executive Committee, which is its highest decision-making body between conferences, that body passed a resolution calling on Cabinet urgently to establish a permanent, standalone, independent anti-corruption body And essentially, their resolution ticks the boxes that were created in the second Glenister case. In that case, the majority said these are the criteria by which you measure the constitutional compliance of your anti-corruption machinery of state: specialized, trained, independent, properly resourced, and secure in tenure of office. Now, the Scorpions had the first four, but they weren't secure because they didn't have the protection of Chapter 9 status. So those criteria are really a very short summary of a very long judgment. But at the end of the day, if those criteria are not satisfied, you are not in a position to say that we have applied and honored and respected the judgment in the second Glenister case. And the judges sounded it out loudly and clearly. These are the criteria by which we measure.
So does it mean that we're getting another Scorpions? Because you've now said the ANC are supporting it, the DA is supporting it, so you got your 2/3 majority. You can get the Integrity Commission created. Is it like having new Scorpions or resuscitating the Scorpions?
It would be new Scorpions is not enough. I'm afraid the ANC is at the point of saying we're prepared to bring back the Scorpions. In the SONA this year, February 2021, the president announced that it is intended to create a statutory body which will report to Parliament and not to the executive. Now, that's a step in the right direction. But he said an advisory council will be established and will spend the next 2 years working out how best to create the statutory council. Now, that is actually a step backwards from Glenister 2, because a statutory body was there in the form of the Scorpions. It did not enjoy the security of tenure of office that is required in terms of that STIRS acronym, the last S in STIRS being secure tenure of office. And so to do it is simply not going to cut it, constitutionally speaking. So really the argument or the friction point at this stage is to get the ANC to the point where it recognizes that a mere statute is not enough, and that a constitutional amendment of some kind is required to remove corruption busting, of the heavy corruption busting, from the investigative capacity of the Hawks and the prosecutorial capacity of the National Prosecuting Authority. When we started on this, we put up draft legislation in 2012. We still thought then that the NPA was sufficiently intact to be able to do the prosecution work. We know now, because Shamila Batoy is an honest public servant and she's well supported by Hermione Cronje, that they have looked at the innards of the National Prosecuting Authority from the inside, and they have reported to Parliament that it is hollowed out, lacking in capacity, lacking in resources, and infested with saboteurs who were put there as part of the state capture project in order to thwart any prosecution against well-connected cronies of those who ran the state capture project. So we've shifted our ground to the point now where we reckon that best practice demands that both investigation and prosecution take place through the vehicle of a new Chapter 9 institution, which enjoys all the protections of Chapter 9, the constitutionally guaranteed without fear, favor, or prejudice status, and a reporting line to Parliament, not to the executive branch of government in the form of the Minister of Justice or whoever else might be interested. The suggestion from Vusi Pikoli, who is the man who was suspended by Thabo Mbeki for going after Police Chief Jackie Selebi and fired by Kgalema Motlanthe when he was president because he was going after Jacob Zuma. So he knows the rough end of this. He says that the Integrity Commission should have in its enabling legislation a provision that says it is a criminal offense for anybody in the executive branch of government to interfere with the operations of that Chapter 9 institution. And I'm inclined to agree with him. I think that will keep political meddling at bay on pain of criminal sanction.
So is it going to happen?
I think it should happen. I think if it doesn't happen, we will fail as a state. I think there's a lot of, Clem Sutner has got to the point now where he says we stand a 50-50 chance of failing. The main reason why we should do it at this time and quickly is because a properly capacitated specialist body is in a position to rake back the loot of state capture. Now, there are various estimates out there, but let's just assume for the sake of argument that the lower estimate of 1 trillion rand is accurate. 1 trillion rand is a great deal of money. There are 18 zeros to the left of the decimal point before you get to the 1 in 1 trillion. And if it's more than 1 trillion, well, it's even more money. And it's very difficult when you are looting on the scale that we saw in the state capture project as revealed at the Zondo Commission to hide the loot. You have to turn it into assets. You have to move it offshore into bank accounts, which are these days traceable with clever software that these forensic accountants can bring to bear, and civil proceedings to recover the loot of state capture will pay for the Criminal Justice Administration for a merry month of Sundays, because there is a great deal of money involved, and the cost of running a properly motivated and upskilled integrity commission to go after the big shots of corruption is going to be minuscule compared to what the return you can get on that investment.
And all of that's great. But my question really is, without the support of the ANC, it can't happen. Are you confident the ANC is going to support the creation of this Chapter 9 institution, which we know? You've explained it extremely well. We need it. The country needs it. It's going to claw back lots of money, etc. But the track record of the ANC would count against it to this point. Are you confident that leopard has changed its spots?
Well, I know that the ANC is a body, a political party or a liberation movement that is shot through with problems because of corrupt activities. It's my hope that the reformist agenda of President Ramaphosa, his uttering the right words at great occasions of state, like the opening of Parliament and so on, those sentiments and that resolution that was taken in a year ago, in August last year, instructing Cabinet to basically create constitutionally compliant anti-corruption machinery of state, should get the wagon through the drift. And if it doesn't, it will mean that the baddies in the ANC have won through, that the faction that seems at the moment to be on the back foot because Zuma is in jail, Ace Magashule is in the dock in a criminal case, and many of its leading members are suspended. Thinking of Carl Niehaus and Andili Lungisa, who are both suspended from the ANC. The ANC wants to win the next election, then it needs to take into account that before Ramaphosa won at Nasrec, its own research was showing that it enjoyed 40% of the popular vote. And his promises and his New Dawn and renewal agenda, his respectable facade, managed to persuade enough people to take that 40% to the 57% that the ANC has now. If they don't, before the next general election, follow through on the anti-corruption promises, they are going to be punished by the electorate. The South African electorate has become increasingly sophisticated over the years. People are not fools. They can see what is going on within the ANC. They can see who is creating the sort of havoc that was experienced in KZN and Gauteng in the run-up to Madiba's 103rd birthday. And if they continue to vote for the ANC in those circumstances, well, more fool the electorate.